I am Dr. Enaka Yembe, and this video is about how intermittent fasting helped me in my weight loss journey. And so far, I have lost about 91 pounds in the past 2.5 years. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll talk about what intermittent fasting is, the different types of intermittent fasting, some of its health benefits, how to get started, exactly what to eat and when, and then I'll share with you some tips and tricks that I have learned along the way. Now, before we go in depth here, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a board certified family medicine physician practicing general medicine and emergency medicine in Louisiana. I'm also a weight loss expert. You know, I started coaching on weight loss in 2006, and that's one of my biggest passions now. It's so ironic that all my life I struggled with obesity. I was born at almost 10 pounds, grew into an obese child, obese teenager, and an obese adult. And after I had my two beautiful daughters in my 30s, my weight blossomed to almost 300 pounds. By this time, my cholesterol was elevated, my blood sugar was creeping up slowly, so was my blood pressure, and I was suffering from a metabolic syndrome, which is a high risk factor for heart disease, which is currently the #1 killer in the United States. Now, I started trying to diet. I also went to the gym. I hired a personal trainer. That did not work. I started running. I completed 5Ks, a half a marathon, and even a full marathon, and I was still overweight. After struggling for about 9 years, in 2010, I was back to my starting weight. At this point, I decided to double down and study the reasons why and how to eat, how to exercise. I studied everything that I could lay my hands on when it came to weight loss. And keep in mind, by this time, I had already passed the age of 50, so things had really slowed down for me. But anyway, over a 9-year span, I learned so much about weight loss, and I took everything that I learned, applied that to myself over a 2-year span. In addition to that, I designed a 6-step program called the Evolve Method. Right now, I coach my clients using that method, and it has transformed my life and the lives of several people. Now, about a year ago, I heard about intermittent fasting, and like everything new, I scoffed at it. But anyway, as you know, if you have struggled with your weight, you know that you have to be willing to try new things. You also should know that when you try one thing, it may work, and at a certain point, it may stop working. And that's exactly where I found myself. I had some stubborn pounds that were not budging. So I gave intermittent fasting a try, and it worked for me. So first things first, today I am not giving you medical advice. I'm simply going to share with you some tips and some tricks that worked for me when it comes to intermittent fasting. I advise you to seek the advice or the help of your medical provider if you have questions regarding your medical health. In addition to that, I strongly recommend that you get clearance from your medical provider before you embark on any weight loss journey. Now, what really is intermittent fasting? Very simply, intermittent fasting is not a diet. It is simply making a conscious decision to skip certain meals. In other words, it's simply scheduled eating, okay? And that's it. So let's look into how intermittent fasting works. Now, when you eat, your body processes the food that you eat, and the energy from the food is readily available. And so your body uses that energy first. Now, if you eat too much, your body stores the excess energy as fat. Now, when you are not eating, your body goes to the stores of energy and it uses those. Now, first it goes to your liver and your muscle, and it uses a starch called glycogen, and it uses that as energy. So it uses that first when you're not eating. Now, if you don't eat for 12 hours, by the time you pass that 12-hour mark, your glycogen stores in your liver especially are depleted, and then your body starts turning to fat for energy. And that's how intermittent fasting helps you to burn fat. In addition to that, after 12 hours, there's a hormone that's produced called human growth hormone that helps stimulate muscle production and fat burning. And so, in a nutshell, that's how intermittent fasting causes weight loss or fat loss. Now, I want to tell you a few people who should not do intermittent fasting. Now, if you've struggled with an eating disorder, or if you are immune compromised, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding or planning to become pregnant or above the age of 65, intermittent fasting is really not for you. Now, if you have health problems, especially if you are above the age of 65, intermittent fasting is not for you. If you're also below the age of 18, and those of you who are below your ideal weight, so if you're underweight, very underweight especially, intermittent fasting is not for you. Now, lastly, if your job requires you to operate heavy machinery where you could put your life in danger or the lives of others, should you become suddenly weak or dizzy, then please, intermittent fasting is not for you either. Okay? So then let's talk about the different types of intermittent fasting. And I'll just briefly tell you the ones that I know of. Now, the first one is the 5-2 fast. Very simply, you eat normally for 5 days, and then in the other 2 days, you have very restricted calories, between 500 and 600 calories for the rest of the 2 days. The next one really is a good place for beginners, is the 12-hour fast, and it means exactly that. You do not eat for 12 hours, and the other 12 hours you eat normally. That's usually for beginners. Now, my favorite one is the 16-8 fast, and that's the one I do most of the times. And you fast for 16 hours, and then you feed during an 8-hour window. The next one is the 20-hour fast, or the warrior diet, and it's exactly that. You don't eat for 20 hours, and you eat during a 4-hour period. Now, the other prolonged fasts, like the 24-hour fast, where you don't eat for 24 hours. There's a 48-hour fast. I have done a 48-hour fast, believe it or not. And then you can fast for 36 hours or 72 hours. And these are prolonged fasts. I do not recommend that you fast. You perform a prolonged fast more than once or twice a month. Now, long fasts like 48-hour fast or 72-hour fast, I don't really think you should do those every single month either. The bottom line is that there is no one size fits all. Pick the one that works for you, the one that suits your lifestyle best, because you want to do it long term. Now, let's look at some of the health benefits of intermittent fasting. And my favorite one is weight loss. Hands down, every time I try intermittent fasting, I am doing it strictly for weight loss. And the way intermittent fasting helps you lose weight is by reducing your insulin levels when you're fasting and increasing your human growth hormone levels. So intermittent fasting helps with decreasing your body fat. It would also help lower your cholesterol, decrease your blood pressure, and reduce your risk of becoming diabetic. Intermittent fasting also is anti-inflammatory. It helps improve your digestive system, helps reduce bloating, because when you're not eating, your gut bacteria and your wall lining are resting, and so the functioning just improves with intermittent fasting because your gut lining can heal and it performs its function better. Intermittent fasting also helps with increased energy levels and increased resistance to stress. Now, it is true that in the beginning, You may experience some fatigue or some lightheadedness, but as your body gets used to intermittent fasting, typically in the first 2 to 3 days, this lightheadedness goes away, and then you really experience increased energy, especially if you do it well. There's increased ketone production, which is really a better source of energy for your brain and for your body. Now, lastly, most people say intermittent fasting helps with mental clarity and helps increase your focus. Now, like I said in the beginning, you may feel lightheadedness. You may even have a headache, especially if you're not drinking enough water. But after those 2-3 days, then you start to feel the release of some hormones called catecholamines, which are released during fasting, and that really helps with mental clarity and improves your focus. So those are the health benefits of intermittent fasting. Now let's move on to practical things. Getting started, that's the question I get the most. Remember, intermittent fasting is not a diet. It's simply a timed approach to eating. So the very first thing that you need to determine or figure out before you go into intermittent fasting is, what's your goal? My goal, like I've said over and over, was for weight loss. But some people don't even want to lose weight. Some people just do it for health benefit. Some people do it for mental clarity. Some people just do it to improve their metabolic function. You need to figure out before you start what your goal is. Okay, that's the first thing. Next thing, you need to pick a method. Do you want to do the 12-hour fast? Do you want to do the 16-hour fast? Think about something that will be sustainable for you long term. The number one reason why people fail at intermittent fasting really is because they pick a schedule that does not work with their lifestyle. There's no one size fits all. Like I said, for me, the 16-8 fast is my go-to schedule most of the time because it just works for me. I start eating at 8 a.m., I stop eating at 4 p.m. That just works for me best for my schedule. But you want to pick something that you can stick with long term. Next, think about your caloric needs. Again, back to your goal. Do you want to lose weight? Remember, intermittent fasting, again, is not a diet. It doesn't dictate what you eat. So if your goal is to lose weight, you want to think about your caloric needs. Lastly, think about what meal plan are you going to follow, okay? Intermittent fasting is not a diet, but it's a timed, scheduled eating, okay? So for me, planning is very important. Now, intermittent fasting is true. It simplifies things because you're not figuring out how to eat all the time, but you do want to go into it planning. So I still meal prep. I prepare my breakfast, my lunch, my last meal. I prepare all of that and pack it up every night, and I get it ready for the next day. Very, very important. Now you're thinking, exactly what do you need to consume? Number one, water. You need to drink enough water to stay hydrated. And one simple way to figure out if you're drinking enough water is just to look at your urine. I know that sounds a little bit gross for some people. That may gross you out. But the fact is, if you are peeing very dark urine, chances are you're not drinking enough. So for me personally, I keep my fluid intake to 2.5 to 3 liters of water, depending on how much I'm exercising and how much I'm sweating. But keep up your water intake. Very important. Next, consume some healthy fats. And you can find this in nuts and in foods like avocado. These keep you full longer. They do keep you full longer, and you want your food, you want to eat things that are filling. Next, I advise you to eat some healthy proteins. So white meats like fish, chicken. Yes, you can eat some red meat, that's fine, but increase your protein intake. And no, intermittent fasting will not cause you to lose muscle. But then again, you do want to keep up your protein intake. Eat your vegetables, especially the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. Those have a higher fiber content. Basically, you want to stay on a clean diet when you're intermittent fasting. It just helps with overall health. Lastly, probiotics. I like to take probiotics during intermittent fasting. It just helps settle my gut, makes me feel better, and I don't have any stomach issues. Now, again, because I'm doing intermittent fasting for weight loss, you want to be careful with fruits. Some fruits have a very high sugar index, so I tend to stick with the berries. Blueberries, strawberries, I find that are lower in sugar, and I try to consume those early in the morning with my breakfast. Just a few blueberries in my oatmeal, that works for me. Now, I'll just put this out there. Eggs are my favorite all-time protein. They do help me keep me full. You cannot really binge on eggs. There's just so many you can eat in one day. Very good source of protein. Okay. Now, here are some tips and tricks that I learned along the way. Now, the first time I tried to fast, I fasted for 16 hours, and then I broke my fast with a bowl of oatmeal. Now, I did not have any problems. I mean, I felt great. Now, the next day, I broke my fast with some eggs and a piece of toast. And that hurt. That hurt my stomach. That really hurt my stomach. And I started to wonder why. And then I figured out that I needed to consume something very light when I'm breaking my fast. So, especially if you do a prolonged fast, like 18 hours, 20 hours, 24 hours, I recommend that you break that fast with something liquid or something very light. Generally, the longer fasts, I break those with bone broth. Look up the recipe. Bone broth is very, very gentle on your stomach, and it just helped me with the cramping when I'm coming out of a prolonged fast. I'll take some bone broth, wait about 30 minutes to an hour, and then have my first meal. Now, if you are breaking that fast after exercising, especially after running, then I recommend that your first meal, you make that a protein shake or just protein. Now, generally, if you want to stay healthy, especially if you want to lose weight, you do want to avoid processed foods throughout the time that you're intermittent fasting. Now, one of the tips and tricks that I also learned and I know is that the longer you intermittent fast, then number one, your hunger level decreases, your cravings tend to go away, and then when you sit down to eat, you just don't eat that much. So I encourage you to practice eating slowly, and that would help you to really get full quicker, and then you're eating more mindfully. So during your intermittent fasting, while you are in your fasting window, you should consume nothing but water, unsweetened tea, and unsweetened coffee with just nothing in it. Okay, so I hope these tips help you in your journey. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to hear from me again, please hit that subscribe button before you go. That way you'll be informed